G'day investigators, Mike Evans with episode number 96 of Investigations Uni. If you've been in Australia since the early 70s, number 96 will have a special meaning for you, and I'm sure you'll enjoy reflecting on it quite happily if you're that old like me. Basically, in today's program, people, we're going to cover who VSIAC is and why it's important to investigators, loss adjusters, government investigators, security vetters, fraud controllers, people who hold advanced diplomas, licensed private investigators, etc. And we will cover that. And we're also going to look at how many licensed private investigators there are today in your state. We did this 2 years ago, and we'll do a comparison of the numbers. Basically, we have to discuss the capacity building of VSIAC and its relevance to you as an investigator so that you understand that as your role as a government investigator, security vetter, government investigations manager or fraud controller or workplace inspector or licensed private investigator or loss adjuster. So this is very important and very relevant to you. Before I get into that, some of the news of this week, Georgia Marcy from KPMG has come out on LinkedIn and told us all that the new regulations in relation to bribery and corruption are coming into effect in Australia in September. So great little presentation by the effervescent Georgia as she explains what it is and how you can get more information out of it. So join up with Georgia on LinkedIn and she'll have information on what's happening in bribery and corruption in the future moving forward in Australia. Great news there from Georgia, really good update. Down in Tasmania, they've been suffering severe weather, and the causeway between Sorell and Midway Point was hit by large waves, which caused a few accidents and lots of delays on the causeway. Now, this brought great memories back to me because I'm wearing my camouflage bow tie today. This is the causeway, what it looks like on a fine day after an accident. And the causeway is something like 2 kilometres long. You can see for miles. It's a straight road, and it has those wire fencing guards that stop cars going over the edge in an accident and ending up in the water. Now, in this case, a car's gone over. I'm not showing you that in the photo. I'm just showing you the wire protection barrier on the causeway. Now, this was taken a year or so ago after an accident. And basically what I was doing, I was driving along that causeway one day. It was a Saturday afternoon. It was rather balmy springtime. There was no other cars on the causeway except one coming towards me. And it was a subject I'd been looking for 6 months and couldn't find. Now, naturally, I had to instantaneously turn around and follow him. He was going the other direction. Now, I couldn't alert him to the fact that I was following, so I had to let him get out of sight off the causeway before I did a 3-point turn or attempted to do a 3-point turn on a very narrow causeway in order to follow him. I went round, I reversed, I intended to then turn right and go forward, hit the accelerator, and my vehicle wouldn't move. The engine roared and it wouldn't move. This doesn't happen in my security risk assessments for surveillance. So I thought, what's going on here? So I tried again. The car would not move. No matter how hard I hit the accelerator, the wheels weren't spinning. So I put it into neutral, put on the handbrake, got out and had a look. And what had happened is the tow bar on my vehicle had entangled in the wire ropes on the causeway, and I couldn't move forward to go and follow my subject. So I had to lift the wire rope off, release it, and then I could go and do it. Had a very successful outcome after a bad start in relation to that. So please, people, put that one in your security risk assessments if you have causeways and wire barriers. It's very important. So that's news this week. That's what's been happening around Australia. So let's get back to VSIAC and what it is. So VSIAC is the organisation that is responsible for giving advice to the Victorian Police Minister and the Police Commissioner in relation to issues in security industry in Victoria going forward. So they provide specific advice as requested by the Minister of Police and Emergency Services in relation to the viability of proposals and reform. So they might come up, from a survey or from an incident where someone's been corrupt and the Victorian Worksafe scheme. And as a result of that, they've got to make a major adjustment to licensing and to the viability of industry associations, because the corruption involved in industry association, for example. So then they've got to address the knowledge, skill, information and attitude gaps that left that to be able to be done. So they advise the minister on this sort of thing, and it's very important, and it's quite expensive too. So their role is basically reform and viability.
Only pretending to reform.
No, they're not only pretending to reform, Batman.
Yeah, from Reformation times.
So they've discovered it from Reformation times in that Bond movie.
So act reform, but we need their money, so not to reform.
Okay, how much reform can the investigators take?
Its long-term viability is best established unemotionally.
So it's an unemotional process of establishing the long-term viability.
To determine its viability within the moral principles of this company.
Okay, moral principles of the Victorian security industry lead to viability. And we all say...
To viability.
Why not? So the Victorian security industry this week is meeting with VSIAC to advise them on their remit for what they have to do. Now, they say on their website that it only involves electronics and security and basically security manpower and guarding. Well, that's rubbish. It involves private investigators as well. We have a seat on the VSIAC table. Now, every time we raise something, we're over talked about it. We are not listened to. We don't get a hearing. And I'm sure, look, there's lots of people that can identify with that. But it's life. These are big security companies on that panel with us. And basically those big security companies, run the security for the Australian airports, for the Australian shipping harbours, for transport in Australia, for the security of the defence bases. And they're all owned by China. So the Chinese government's raking in $4 billion a year from that. And they're sitting on this board just saying, no, there's no relevance to private investigators. Well, they might have that in 30 years' time and then they might include us. But we're on the board. That's the important thing. We're there. Okay, so we're watching what they do. And you can look it up, VSIAC and what it's all about. So they meet quarterly. And why is it important to us as people in the industry? Well, they discuss issues that are important. So next year, coming in, you will have to be a security business if you want to be a private investigator in Victoria. In New South Wales, that's the case already. Okay, in Western Australia, in South Australia, in Tasmania, you have a choice. All right, okay, so you've got choices. So that's really, really important. So you have choices in other states. In Victoria, you have no choice coming into the future, just like in New South Wales. Where did this come from? Well, back in 2021, most unfortunately, in the time of COVID, they commissioned a review of the industry, and the consultants did a big, expensive review of the security industry in Victoria. The security industry in Australia is worth $10 billion. Okay, back in 2000, it was worth $4 billion. So it's a major industry now. In Victoria, probably they'd have a good $4 billion worth of security down in Victoria. Okay, so they go through page after page discussing the review. And if you look there, two RTOs contributed to the review, and the Australian Security Academy, who you can see in the bottom right-hand corner, the logo on your screen, who bring you the Investigations Uni each week, contributed to that review, because we have 1,000 members of ELA who are Australian Security Academy graduates. And we basically try to ensure that any reform, any review is going to be beneficial and not negative to our past and current graduates and our future students and current students. So that's why we're there. We're monitoring this sort of thing. We're not feeding stuff like corruption in the VWA, like some industry associations do and create it. That just creates problems for the security industry and the Commissioner of Police and the Minister of Police in Victoria. We don't do that. other investigation industry associations do by who they associate with and what their associates get up to, like Bribery. There was the Professional Investigators College of Australia bribed 120 times a member of a person that worked for International Security Training Academy. And basically, that's corruption and bribery in the scheme, and the Victorian Police Licensing Regulation Authority cancelled all those qualifications and licences as a result of that bribery and corruption. So this is what we lobby for. It's what the Victorian Police monitor. The Victorian Police licensing scheme is a hard friction scheme. This is really important you understand this. You have to apply for a licence. You have to be a suitable person to hold a licence, private investigator or security guard, firearms, cash in transit, doesn't matter what it is. All right, so they're saying in these reviews, do we still have to have hard friction? Is that going to stop the corruption in Worksafe in Victoria, or is it going to enable it and keep it going with associates of industry associations trying to make sure that they're on the 12-member panel instead of being kicked off it by guaranteeing that membership of an industry association is taken up by Worksafe Victoria, and Worksafe Victoria swim with the tide and run with it. So with all these things happening, and I'm going really fast, I understand that this is what the VSIAC is there to monitor, watch, review, and ensure doesn't happen. So for 58 pages, they go on and on and on and on. And in their summary, basically, they tell you they're only looking at security, not investigation. So they're very honest about it. But hey, look, at least we're there. So let's have a quick a quick look at how it affects you, the private investigator. Let's just have a look. Back a few 2 years ago, we did a survey here and we found that there was 1,619 investigators licensed in New South Wales, 1,585 in Victoria, etc., etc. So let's have a look at where it is today and how this is relevant to you competing as a licensed PI in the industry. In New South Wales, there's 1,641 licensed investigators. Basically, it's the same, except for 50 as it was 2 years ago. Okay, so that's the current state. In Western Australia, there are 167 inquiry agents and 627 licensed investigators. Inquiry agents in Western Australia are like a business. So that's your master licence as in New South Wales, or your business licence as in Victoria. In Western Australia, they call it an inquiry agent's licence. So 627 investigators in Western Australia. Sadly, South Australia, Queensland, Northern Territory didn't contribute hard numbers because they didn't differentiate security guards from private investigators. So if we go back 2 years, we know that Northern Territory had 129 licensed investigators. South Australia had 760 investigators. So that's basically, and Queensland had 904 investigators. So that'd be pretty much very similar today. So Queensland might have a few more. It's just disappointing they didn't contribute. They don't talk to me for various reasons. I don't care. In Victoria, this is what VSIAC are meeting about. How many licensed PIs are there in Victoria? Well, there are 880 pure PI licenses. Now, 2 years ago, as you can see there's 1,585. That is a massive reduction of over 40%. There are 150 private investigator trainers licensed. So I am a licensed private investigator in Victoria. I'm a licensed private investigator trainer in Victoria. And the Australian Security Academy is a licensed security business in Victoria. That number doesn't go up at the 880 extra 2 times because of those extra licenses I've got. It stays at that. Okay, so there are only 880 pure PI licensed in Victoria. Of all those, only 85 investigators hold a Victorian business licence. Now, they've got bad news coming up because 800 have to get a business licence, a Victorian security business licence, before July next year. Now, you might think, oh, yeah, well, that costs, an extra $600 for 3 years or whatever. So if you're just entering the industry down there, this is the best time to be going into it, because a lot of those 800 people say, oh, no, I'm not doing that. oh, we'll go and become a loss adjuster. We don't have that crap, right? That's fine. It opens up the entry for you to go in and earn a lot of money. So this is really good news if you're just coming into the industry and you look at it as an opportunity, because that's what it is, because they are going to enforce it. Absolutely going to enforce that that is going to happen. Like it or not, the investigators in Australia are going to have to do that. Now, I've just got to see if I've got another presentation here. No, I haven't. I'll let it go. All right. So basically, this is what VSIAC are doing and implementing. Get used to it. It's quite good news. Now, we go back to, I mentioned before about corruption, and George is saying about corruption coming into the industry, and I told you about Victorian Worksafe being corrupt with an industry association, making it mandatory for Worksafe's staff to be members of that association and hold a diploma of fraud control from a non-nationally recognised organisation that's basically American, and has bugger all relevance to Australians in terms of reward for what you get for your $3,000. It's not nationally recognised. So, you know, it's internationally recognised, which is great. You can sell it to a lot of accountants, but it's a hard sell to actual private investigators who really are not interested in that kind of work. So we look at, you know, Victoria Worksafe and how they have all these standards to meet. They're a very hard friction government department when it comes to supplying services to them. And you can see all these things that you have to have here that were ignored when Worksafe ran with the AIPI's proposal to make all their staff at Worksafe members of the AIPI. No meetings, no records, no minutes, no gift registry, total ignoring of all the requirements to be a supplier to Victorian Worksafe means money's changed hands, possibly. Favours have been asked, possibly. What's the future reward? Free breakfast, free membership, free lunch? We don't know. Worksafe Victoria have not come out and declared that. So that's really interesting, and this is what VSIAC are interested in. If VSIAC allows this and looks the other way, nah, okay, we don't want to know. We don't know about that. They're opening up the doors for corruption in the airports, in security, corruption in shipping and transport, in security, corruption at the defence bases, in security. Like I said, Chinese own big security businesses. Okay. Where if they did it in their own country, they'd have a firing squad for that sort of thing, and there'd be no argument. Here, the guardrails of safety against fraud and corruption have to come into place by the reviews done to ensure the future viability of the industry by the regulator, which in this case is VSIAC. So there's another recent example. So what Crime Stoppers had recently in Australia in April, they disassociated themselves with Crime Stoppers International. Now, Crime Stoppers International have an association with a couple of adult entertainment websites, multiple adult entertainment websites. Now, Crime Stoppers International effectively put up their hand. Sorry, Crime Stoppers Australia put up their hand and said, well, we're not going to do that. It doesn't reflect the family values of what we're about at Crime Stoppers. We want people ringing up Crime Stoppers to report a crime. Not to get links and SMSs back about their favourite perversion. Okay, so Crime Stoppers have put their hand up and stopped that. Now, Crime Stoppers are a big part of ASIAL, who claim to be the peak body of security associations in Australia, and advise VSIAC In December 2023, Crime Stoppers took out a full-page ad in The Australian, which would be very expensive, and rubbished the regulators in Victoria and New South Wales, saying that just because they have a separation of powers and a state-based licensing system, they're cash cows. ASIAL, who said that, are sitting on this board in Victoria today. Are that board going to take that rammed down their throat by ASIAL and listen to ASIAL only and stop listening to the investigation industry that actually knows what's going on? Well, we'll see. Going back to that review, it's a private security industry review, and they had consultation, it tells you this, and they had background as to why they had that review, and they had all the people that were involved in that review. And as you can see down there, it's got RTOs, and there were two of them, and one of them was me. And they're looking at the impetus for industry change, public safety, technology, changing attitudes, changing whatever, the police and how they look at things now, and how security are included in policing roles. And I found this one really interesting. They gave examples of things that had crapped out in the security industry in Australia. And one of them was at one of the universities, a security guard in the control room, and you can see it highlighted there, was using the CCTV to film female university students inappropriately and take inappropriate images of them. Now, this is the big issue coming back to Victorian Worksafe, who associated themselves with the AIPI, who had a member who took photos of students in his class and distributed them on social networking. To VSIAC, that's a big issue. It's in their review. It's the same thing. It's a power imbalance. This person's got access to be able to do that. If they kick up a fuss about it, the victims, well, we'd kick them out of the university, kick them out of the investigation industry, take their qualification off them. Power imbalance, can't do it, apart from the fact that it makes everybody else, male or female, uncomfortable. And it could result in, an associate of that person going postal and going into the workplace and severely hurting someone or fatally hurting someone. So this is what security industry reviews are all about. They understand that there are people taking pervy photos. They know that. They're not going to let any industry association allow that. But what about the Victorian Police Licensing Regulation Division? And why aren't they stopping this on hold? Well, they are. It's a hard friction application process you have to apply. You have to be approved. You have to have a criminal background check. You have to have references. You have to be able to afford a license for 3 years. There are hard friction application processes in the Victorian Police Licensing Regulation to become a security guard or a private investigator. And for a business license, you have to advertise for objections to you holding a business license. And that's a nervous wait for a lot of people. And you can't advertise in the Benalla dog show paper. It's got to be in a national paper that you put that ad, so any objections can come forward. Now, the Licensing Regulation Division, as it says in that review, do not have currently the resources that allow it to undertake any significant field compliance activity beyond what they do already in their hard friction license application process. They can't go around and monitor the training of security guards and private investigators and make sure that no teacher's taking photos and distributing them on social networking in their class, supported by an industry association who tolerates that and accepts sponsorship in its annual conference. If that happened in Victoria, they wouldn't allow it. They'd shut you down tomorrow. But they can't go out and see it. They can only be alerted to it through their complaints process, which they have. And if anyone complains about that, then yes, they would take action. And basically, they'd shut down the industry association that enabled it. That's what they would do. Because industry associations have a hard friction application process in Victoria as well. But anyway, that industry association would still be alive in Queensland, where it's no trouble at all in anyone getting a licence. Okay, no one's going to stand in your way there, or an industry association. So what the Victorian Police Licence Regulation Division is saying, we're under-resourced, we're underfunded. We can't carry out those activities. And if VSIAC goes to them and say, look, we want you to take responsibility for the security risk assessments coming in June next year and moving forward on that, basically the cops are going to go, we haven't got any money. It's now 6 months for a person applying for a licence because we're so stretched financially and by staff. If we go and do the security risk assessment, check to make sure everyone's doing a security risk assessment on their investigation activity 24 hours in advance, approved by the client and approved by the insurance company, which won't happen, right? They haven't got the resources or the funding to do it. If VSIAC want them to do that, then the Victorian Minister for Police and Emergency Services is going to have to cop up the money. Where would they get it from? Well, Victorian Worksafe earns $6 billion every year now. And they're very comfortable with sort of agreements and assistance with other places. Certainly, Worksafe should make a contribution to the Victorian Police Licence and Regulation Division because it's in their interests to do so as part of the Victorian security industry. So what I'm saying is the Victorian Police Licence and Regulation Division do an amazing job without any support, with very little funding and very little recognition of just how good a job they do in a limited hard friction application process. They could do an even better job if they were given the resources to go out and follow through on a lot of these investigations and complaints and go and find out specifically what's been happening. It's a crying shame that in 2024 they do not have that capability. So people, VSIAC's meeting, it's relevant to everyone. You can get involved by joining an industry association such as ASIS or the AISP. There are several of them. Don't be afraid to join an industry association to have your voice heard. VSIAC make the ultimate decision. They have no problem in engaging consultants who have no idea about what goes on in the industry to make pretty expensive documents in relation to it, when rather less expensively they could listen to the people who are already on the VSIAC board. And they can ensure that the $6 billion income from the Victorian Worksafe is spent wisely with a contribution made to the Victorian Police Licensing Regulation Division. I'm Mike Evans. I hope you enjoyed our program today. We told you how many investigators there are out there. There they are in Victoria, 880, in 120 down in Tassie, 627 in Western Australia, 1,641 in New South Wales. Interesting day. See you over at Spy Curious, where we're going to look at giving bad news. That's episode number 96 of Investigations Uni. I'm Mike Evans. See you next week, people. Thanks for watching.